What is going on, everybody? Got Jordan Elliott with us today. How are you doing, Jordan, on this fantastic Thursday?
I am feeling pretty good. It's been a fun season. I hope it's not coming to an end after this week, but it's been a time of reflection for me. We've had 18 fun weeks of 49er football, and I hope it continues for at least one more. But just grateful to be here, man.
Absolutely. Let's start with some of the news that's been coming out this week. We're going to get into the Texans game. We're going to preview the Rams game. We're going to do it all, but I do want to talk about some of the videos that have been coming out from practices today with Jimmy Garoppolo and the whole thumb situation. What is your takeaway? And if you had to be, if you were a betting man, Jordan, who would you bet is also going to be the starting quarterback come Sunday against the Rams?
I mean, as a betting man, I wouldn't bet on this, but if I had to do it, so people don't want to hear this because Trey Lance had a couple big plays last week. The majority of people are kind of at a point where they're like, they've seen what they've seen from Jimmy and they're done. I've made it no secret that I'm not a big fan of the guy, and I think that they were smart to move on. But having said that, he does have a track record of success against the Rams defense. There's a familiarity there. There's a comfortability there. There's an amount of cohesion that he and Kyle have attacking this defense. And I think that that's something that you can't really overlook in this situation. Obviously, the determining factor here is if you can't grip a football and throw it properly, none of that stuff matters. So it'll be interesting to see how much he's able to push through that. Because if it's a pain management thing, as many of us know, the NFL is a game where these guys not only are playing through pain regularly, but they also are able to take stuff. There's shots they can give these guys before games. There's ways they can kind of numb that thumb and keep it, viable to get through 3.5 hours of game time. So, I would say Jimmy, if things continue the way they're going now, because it doesn't seem like they're at a spot where they rule him out. But I could be totally off. This could all just be a smokescreen, and they could start Trey. But I just think the way that Kyle's been all season, he's been so reluctant to put Trey in unless there's been an injury and unless Jimmy physically can't go, that I don't see him budging on that if there's any sliver of hope that Jimmy can get through this game without having to come out due to that thumb.
Absolutely. So obviously we understand it's probably going to come down to the wire in regards to Kyle actually naming the starter. So we'll keep speculating until then. But let's talk about the Texans game a little bit. I want to get some of your thoughts on Trey Lance and his performance against the Texans.
I was concerned a little early. I thought that there were times where it made sense. As I was watching that first half, I'm like, okay, well, this is why Kyle's been adamant that Jimmy's the guy for now and that they've stuck with him. And I don't think it's a talent issue at all. It's more so just getting used to the speed of the NFL game, feeling comfortable going through progressions, and all the little things that go into playing quarterback. Because as everybody saw, Trey Lance doesn't lack arm strength. He doesn't lack physical ability. So at the beginning, I was a little hesitant, but I thought the way he rebounded in the second half, it actually started with that last drive in the first half. That big throw that he had to Deebo Samuel was huge to start the drive. I believe it was 38 seconds left in the first half. They ended up turning it into a field goal, got some points on the board. And even though you're still down 7-3 to a pretty bad football team at home, that feels a lot better than – so I don't know. I muted everything. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why this keeps going off. You're down 7-3, and you get some momentum going into the half. So overall, I thought he played really well. I thought it was really nice to see that he took a couple deep shots, particularly that corner post. That corner post has been called for 49ers quarterbacks for years, and it just, for whatever reason, doesn't get hit. It doesn't get executed. And, I'm watching game film of Aaron Rodgers and Stafford and all these other quarterbacks hit it. So it felt really good to see a 49ers quarterback hit it. And the play specifically I'm referencing is that touchdown to Deebo Samuel. So there was a lot of good, and there also was a lot of, where you see he's a rookie. I don't want to necessarily say bad because it's to be expected, and he's a 21-year-old guy making his second start. But, the interception to Kittle, that can't happen. You can't stare down the defender there. You can't get locked onto one read. You need to be more comfortable working through your progressions there. And if you are going to throw that ball, you can't underthrow it in the manner that he did. So there was some stuff to build on for sure. But I thought overall, I was impressed. And he did enough for the 49ers to win. And I saw some stuff after the game that was like, they managed to pull out a win, and they made it seem like the 49ers won on like a field goal with like time expiring. They won by 16 points, and they covered a 13.5-point spread. Like, I thought that obviously the defense playing really well had a lot to do with that, but Trey Lance still put up a decent amount of points after a pretty bad start, and he got more comfortable as the game went on. So it's kind of, if I had to grade it, I grade it as like a B, like B minus. Like, there was a lot of stuff to be really hopeful about, but I also think that there's a lot to work on. And that's why I've said in past shows on here with you, I think they would be doing him a disservice just throwing him out there at this point in the season, because he needs time to acclimate, because he needs time to get into a groove. And like, we saw the touchdown get called back on that power run that they ran on the GY quarterback counter. And Ayuk gets called for a hold. And that's, it happens. Holding happens even for teams that have a bunch of time to work together. But I think with a full off season of getting the time to work with a mobile quarterback and getting used to implementing the running elements of a Trey Lance within an offense, you're going to see a lot less holds. You're going to see a lot better execution and blocking. You're going to see a lot more cohesion. So I thought that he did pretty well given the circumstances, but I also think that it does sort of validate Kyle Shanahan's decision to be reluctant to start him to this point, and why I think they want to give him a full offseason to kind of be the guy and build an offense tailored to a skill set rather than just doing it on the fly over the course of 1 week.
Absolutely. And just kind of like based on that same thought process and kind of sticking in the hypothetical world, let's say hypothetically Trey Lance was to start this week against the Rams in a must-win game. Do you feel like you'd see kind of the same, maybe not the tale of two halves situation, but just more along the rookie lines of a rookie trying to get settled again? That would be a huge, big game with tons of implications on the line. Would you kind of anticipate a kind of up and down performance from Trey Lance if he, did start this week?
Yeah, I would, and I think a lot of that has to do with how good the Rams defense is. Like the Texans, one thing I do want to say too is that people were just like, "Oh, it was the Texans. It wasn't impressive." I saw a lot of takes like that. The Texans aren't an elite defense by any stretch, but they also aren't terrible. The 49ers played 4 pass defenses that were worse than them when Jimmy started. They played Detroit, Cincinnati, Tennessee, and Seattle. All are ranked lower in terms of passing defense this season. So I do think that the Texans weren't as bad as people made them out to be, but having said that, the Rams are a lot better. So I don't think it's as much of an indictment on Trey Lance not being ready as much as it's, hey, this is your 3rd start in the NFL, and you're going up against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and Von Miller and Leonard Floyd, and a defense that really is, I think overlooked a bit by 49ers fans simply because of how dominant Kyle Shanahan and this 49ers offense has been against them over the last 3 seasons. And, it's one of these things where you can't really make sense of it. And I think Daniel Brunskill is a fine player. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to sit here and act like Daniel Brunskill is just some awful player. But the way that he's been able to match up with Aaron Donald in these games, like, it makes no sense on paper. Like, Aaron Donald is arguably the greatest defensive player of this generation. Like, you'd be hard-pressed to argue who's better. And Daniel Brunskill, either – it's not only that he's like holding his own, it's that he's literally winning these matchups against one of the arguably the best defensive player in the league.
On like outside shades too, like not even head up. He's like reaching them on an outside shade, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Where's this coming from?
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense. But having said, that's why I have trouble, because every time they play, I'm like, all right, well, this is the time when the Rams find they're going to look like the Rams against the 49ers. And it doesn't happen. That Monday night game, I was sitting right next to Brad at Levi's. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. I'm like, this is just incredible. Every time they play now, it seems like the 49ers just have it figured out. So I can see Trey struggling a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see him throw a pick. Jalen Ramsey is obviously one of the best corners in the league. I still think that the secondary is very underrated there. The area of weakness for them has always kind of been the linebackers in the middle of the field and the short area, which is where Jimmy happens to excel, which I don't think is any coincidence why they've had a lot of success there. And I think even a guy like Nick Mullins is capable of hitting those throws regularly, which is why you saw him go on the road and win last year. While I think Trey Lance is very talented, and we obviously saw him hit that throw to Ayuk over the middle, and he's made a couple nice middle of the field, tight window throws in that game. I don't think he's quite – I don't want to say I don't think. I pretty much can say he's not as comfortable as Jimmy Garoppolo in that specific area yet. So it's just a matter of matchup at this point. Like if they have some shots to go deep, I can see him excelling there. But I just think Jimmy's more comfortable at exploiting where the Rams defense has a glaring weakness than Trey is. So if we're comparing them head up, which is unfortunately what people are going to do, they're going to be like, oh, well, Jimmy did this, this, and this in week 10 when they played the Rams. It's unfortunately the way it ends up going. I could see there being a little bit of a disparity just simply because Jimmy's strengths match up far better with the Rams' weaknesses than Trey's do at this point in time.
Do you think it actually, obviously, with Jimmy Garoppolo dealing with the UCL tear, chip bone in his thumb on his throwing hand, do you think, I mean, the fact that he kind of lives in the middle of the field anyways, does that kind of feel like it could still be not as big of an issue? Like, let's say if he was a guy who's predicated on throwing the ball 40 yards downfield, hitting deep outs, doing all kinds of, you know, more complex throws, that it would maybe hinder him more. But the fact that he already kind of lives short to intermediate in the middle of the field, that maybe he will be okay to be able to go out and execute against the Rams.
Yeah, I think one thing that does stand out to me is that the 49ers, and especially last season, not as much this past matchup in week 10, but in the 2020 matchups, particularly that home game where they won when Jimmy was dealing with that ankle injury and wasn't really, 100% then, it felt like they took advantage of the Rams horizontally. Like they really stretched the field side to side. Whereas I think the Rams, again, with that really good pass rush with Floyd and Miller and Donald, and having that back end help in the secondary, they're really good north to south. But I do think that for whatever reason, they've kind of neglected the linebacker spot over the last couple of years, and they've kind of not made it the biggest priority, it feels like. And I feel like that gets exposed when you're getting the ball in the hands of a Deebo Samuel and a Brandon Ayuk, or you're getting the ball, he's obviously not healthy for this game. He's been out this season, but Mostert took advantage of it last year as well. Mm-hmm. So I think their ability to kind of take advantage of them east to west rather than being reliant on going to north to south really does help Jimmy in this kind of sense, because I think that he wouldn't be asked to take as many shots downfield and have to beat them vertically. And I think that so much of what they do is built into stuff around the line of scrimmage, where, again, if it's a pain tolerance issue, I don't think he's going to have any issues getting the ball to playmakers in space near the line of scrimmage.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And kind of talking about the line of scrimmage, what did you see from Elijah Mitchell in his first return after missing 3 games? And just his performance against the Texans and how he can kind of take, that first game back. He talked about it in the press conference being a little rusty. Apparently he made a wrong read on one of the first runs of the game. But obviously he settled in and came away with some pretty solid production in that game. How can you see him kind of, what did you see from that game, and how do you see him transitioning that to the overall scheme and game plan against the Rams?
Well, I think that it's just kind of how he's been a lot of this season. Like earlier in the year, I got some pushback from people when I said early on that I thought he was missing holes, and I thought that he wasn't hitting the right gaps, and I thought that he had struggled a little bit in terms of, knowing where to go with the ball. And again, that's easier for me coming back and watching game film rather than being the guy in them. I'm not going to, pretend like it's easier for him to know that in the moment, but it is part of growing in the NFL. And I think that there was a bit of reluctance for some fans to acknowledge that, because he had the 100-yard game in Detroit. He had a couple big runs where he looked like a dynamic talent. But Mike McDaniel, the offensive coordinator, even said, I think it was before the Colts game, like, yeah, he's been missing some, holds. He's been, not going particularly where we want him to go with the ball at times. But since the Colts game, I thought he's improved greatly since then. So one little mistake to start the game, I don't think really is a huge deal, because overall, the larger body of work, he's gotten better and better as the season has gone on. And I think, again, that's part of just adjusting to the NFL and adjusting that there's going to be a different kind of speed, letting your blocks develop in front of you. And these holes close a hell of a lot quicker in the NFL than they do in college. And I think you see that the raw physical ability. He's been banged up for a good portion of this year, and he's still breaking off 15, 20-yard runs. And you see this cutback ability and the fact that he has good speed, but he also is very physical. Like, that was one thing I talked about a bunch when he was coming out after going over the Niners draft picks and watching the game film. I did a thread on him a few months ago where I'm like, everybody talks about how this guy runs in the 4.3s, but I don't think enough people talk about how he's willing to go through defenders. He doesn't avoid contact. He seeks it out. Mm-hmm. And I think that you're seeing him be this kind of battering ram and this bell cow that we haven't seen under the, guidance of Kyle Shanahan as the 49ers head coach. Like, we haven't seen a guy that's going to go out there that Kyle's just like, hey, I'm going to give you the ball 25 times a game on a regular basis. And he's given the ball to Mitchell, I believe, 18 or more times. I want to say 5 or 6 times this season. I apologize if the number's off. I'm blanking off the top of my head. But that's not normal for what Kyle Shanahan has done. He's done a running back by committee approach. Obviously, a lot of that does have to do with injuries and some stuff they've suffered along the way. But the fact that he trusts a rookie to carry that load says a lot about how he feels about him. So,
Well,
yeah, I
Jeff
think
Wilson didn't get a single touch
yeah,
against
yeah.
the Texans.
I think that Kyle has a lot of faith in him. So how it carries over is I think it's just how it's carried over all season. He's gotten better and better each week. He might have a mistake or two here or there. He has a rep where he doesn't hit the right hole or he's not seeing things clearly. But I think overall he's just progressed tremendously, and I don't see any reason why that would change this week going into Los Angeles.
Absolutely. What do you look at the game plan, obviously, with potentially Jimmy Garoppolo starting, with the kind of emergence of Elijah Mitchell? Again, he ran for 5.7 a clip against the Texans. Do you see a run-heavy scheme headed for the Rams when you think about how to conceptualize a game plan and or do you still see a lot of play action and kind of, or is it really dependent on just who the quarterback is?
I think that they might be a little bit more reluctant to lean on the run if Trey is the quarterback. And it's really funny because there's a lot of nuance that you need for these conversations, because I think people get caught up in seeing Trey Lance take the deep shots we haven't seen Jimmy take and have the arm strength to push the ball 15, 20 yards downfield that not only Jimmy doesn't have, but a lot of quarterbacks in the league don't have. And they equate that with him, Kyle should be throwing
better.
more. Why aren't you dropping back and throwing 30 times with Trey Lance if he has this cannon? And I think that kind of is it's like a mistake in the sense that just because he has the arm strength to do it doesn't mean that he's comfortable reading defenses, reading post-snap adjustments, doing the things it takes to be a consistent NFL quarterback. And while, again, I'm of the mindset that I think Jimmy's been making mistakes that are on a rookie level for years, there's a lot of times where he doesn't see things post-snap and he doesn't see safety rotations and he doesn't see disguised coverages. But you can't deny the overall body of work where Jimmy Garoppolo has had success against the specific defense. He did it against Brandon Staley last year. He did it against Raheem Morris this year. He did it against Wade Phillips going back before that too. There's just been a consistent level of success against this Rams defense. And obviously there's changing parts every year. It's not the same exact defense every season. But for the most part, Kyle Shanahan feels really comfortable attacking the scheme, and we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo be able to execute it. So I would expect there to be more quick game stuff with Jimmy, and they might be more reluctant to have a 3-step drop from under center on first down with Jimmy than they are with Trey, simply based on the fact that I think Jimmy's 8 years of experience in the NFL have equipped him a little bit better for a game of this magnitude against a defense he's seen 5 times. And that doesn't mean that he's better than Trey Lance at throwing the football. And just because Trey Lance has this cannon, it doesn't mean he can't make those throws. It just means that we've seen Jimmy do it time and time again. And it's pretty hard not to rely on a proven commodity if you're able to. And that obviously depends on how his thumb is going to be around game time.
100%. And Latonia says, Brad, do you as a head coach start Jimmy over Trey given the circumstances? And I think to echo kind of what Jordan is saying, it's Jimmy's been here. He's done it before. And this team trusts him. The fan base might not trust him. Twitter might not trust him. Certain analysts like you and I, we have our doubts at certain times. But in that locker room, and based at least on how the outward messaging is they do have a strong level of trust in Jimmy Garoppolo. And there's a lot that goes into being a quarterback between Monday and Saturday that we don't get to see. We don't get to see the conversations. We don't get to see the game planning, the board work. We don't get to see that stuff. So we don't have a true evaluation point and be like, oh, well, Trey's doing this much better in the classroom than we just don't know. So based on everything and how it's going, and if I were at me and Kyle were to switch for one day, I'm probably going to lean towards Jimmy Garoppolo as well. And again, for a lot of the reasons that Jordan is talking about, it's just there's a familiarity against the Rams in these big moments. He's been there. He's the veteran. And that's just kind of what this year is at this point. I think Trey Lance has shown a lot of promise. However, he's still a rookie, still a kid. We saw a little bit of that on the Texans, although the ceiling is through the roof. it's been pretty fun. Here's another question that's going to tie us this just came to me out of nowhere. How would you obviously it's a small sample size for Trey Lance, but looking at the rest of the quarterbacks that were drafted, you look at Mac Jones, you look at Trevor Lawrence, you look at Zach Wilson, you look at Davis Mills, you look at all these other guys, Justin Fields. Again, small sample size, but what have you seen from Trey Lance compared to the other rookie quarterbacks?
I think that Trey has as good of, if not better, physical ability than any of those guys. If you look at the complete package, like I think that Fields might be a better runner if you just isolate the running. Mac Jones might have better processing ability. Arm strength is kind of what I think Trevor Lawrence has a cannon, and I don't think people really give him credit for that because Jacksonville's been such a mess this year. And he's been throwing picks like crazy. He went like 7 or 8 weeks, it felt like, without throwing a touchdown, and he's throwing 3 picks a game. But it feels like Trey Lance kind of has the best parts of all of these guys. And if he can put that whole package together, I think that's why the 49ers were so bullish on taking him at number 3, because they saw the potential to have a guy who could operate this offense from under center, but who also had the ability to extend plays with his legs, who also had the ability to, has this cannon for an arm and can fire the ball downfield, and who also has the mental acumen to absorb an NFL install and, take in that information and then spit it back out in a huddle in a way that conveys it to the offense with confidence and accuracy. So the biggest thing for me that I would say that stands out is like when I watch, and it's hard to say too, because I think that Trey Lance is in arguably the best position, and it's weird to say because he's only played 2 games, but I think compared to maybe the Patriots, that might be the only other one. Josh McDaniels is really good, but Kyle Shanahan's by far the most quarterback friendly offensive mind of all these guys, in my opinion. So like when I was going to compare him to Justin Fields. When you watch Justin Fields, Matt Nagy's calling plays for him. Matt Nagy's just not a great play caller, in my opinion. And I think they even switched to Bill Lazor midway through the season too.
Yeah.
But that offensive staff isn't really doing it for me. So as much as I do think it is on Fields, I just have to throw that caveat out there. But what I was going to say is I think there's times where Fields tucks and runs. He'll hold the ball too long. He'll get caught in one place. And again, a lot of that does have to do with the kind of vanilla, uncreative scheme they're running. But I do think there's a tendency for when things break down, Fields' instinct is just going to run, take 8 yards, take 12 yards, take these little bits. Whereas it felt like with Trey Lance, watching him in this small sample size, he's scrambling out of the pocket, but it's not to take off and run. It's to buy time, and he keeps his eyes downfield. And we saw that turn into a couple plays in this game where with a non-mobile quarterback, it's probably a sack or you're throwing the ball away. And instead, Trey was able to kind of buy time with his legs and hit a target downfield. So that's the biggest thing for me is it feels like with some of these other quarterbacks, Zach Wilson, the same thing, where they're too quick to take off and run. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched every single snap those guys have taken, so I don't want to make it seem like they're doing this every single game. But from what I have seen, there is a little bit more of a tendency for these guys to rely on their athleticism. Whereas it feels like with Trey Lance, he's relying on the athleticism to buy time, but he's not taking off to just instinctually run. And I think that so many people say that Trey Lance is a run-first quarterback and he's this and that and all these things. He genuinely is a guy, and I know you talked about it, you did a breakdown. He's a guy that's looking to throw. He has the ability to run, but he wants to throw the ball. And I think that that's a very mature trait to have at 21 as a rookie, to know that it's better to buy time. Like if we think about it, who's been the biggest thorn in the 49ers side for years? It's Russell Wilson. Yes, Russell Wilson's mobile. He's capable of scrambling. But what he does that kills teams like the 49ers so frequently is he evades pressure and he buys time. And when you're able to buy time, it's unrealistic for NFL defensive backs to be able to cover for 4, 5, 6 seconds. So that precious amount of time you're buying in the backfield, somebody's going to get open downfield. And when you combine that with the absolute rifle that Trey Lance has in terms of his arm strength, it's going to be a great situation where you have Kyle Shanahan who's going to dial up these play calls and he's going to get guys open. And then on top of it, hey, let's say the defensive coordinator called something really good too, or the defensive back has really tight man coverage on a certain player. They played their zone really well. Guess what? Now you have Trey Lance scrambling for 3 or 4 seconds. They're not going to be able to cover. So it's like you get the best of both worlds. You get the best of Kyle Shanahan's going to get a lot of easy open looks for him. And then you also have that fail-safe should the easy looks that Kyle Shanahan's trying to dial up not be there. You have Trey Lance able to extend with his legs. And yeah, he could scramble for a few yards here and there too. But I don't think his running ability is anywhere near as valuable in terms of like the rushing yards as it is with him being able to just buy time to push the ball downfield. And when you see like the absolute hose that this guy has for an arm, like his ability to just sling that rock downfield with the velocity and quickness he does, it's scary to think about as a defense, because if you don't keep him contained in that pocket, you're not going to be able to cover him, and you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to cover these 49ers skill position guys for very long. So it starts to open the the imagination to, man, imagine if these guys really start firing on all cylinders. The 49ers realistically could be an offense that averages over 30 points a game in the coming years because of all the dynamic skill position players they have, because of that talent Trey Lance potentially has, and you have a play caller like Kyle Shanahan. So just the whole package really excites me, man.
So Jason Aponte was on, our good friend, for our episode yesterday, and we were talking about Brandon Ayuk, and he was talking about a world in which Brandon Ayuk is wide receiver 1 for the San Francisco 49ers next year, which is, right now, I think we can wrap our heads around it, but Deebo Samuel obviously has been playing lights out, but part of the thought process is Brandon Ayuk kind of feels like a more complete wide receiver. I know he gets comped to being like a mini Devontae Adams and things like that. Would you agree? Would you, especially with Trey Lance at quarterback? And that was the caveat. That was the caveat with Trey Lance at quarterback.
It's hard to say, because I do think that the way Deebo Samuel had been utilized initially, that maybe it clouded some of us into thinking, and I know you felt the same way for a bit. I did too. It felt like Brandon Ayuk was kind of going to be that alpha number 1 wide receiver. Yeah. Had the better, I don't want to say better, but he has a bigger wingspan. He has, physically, he looks more like, an X wide receiver to me than Deebo does. But right. I don't know, man. It's really hard to discount what Deebo Samuel's done this year. He's the first player in NFL history with 1,300 receiving yards and 300 rushing yards. And the fact that he's getting the ball all over, it's not just, we saw his rookie year, a lot of that stuff was on these quick slants, on drift routes, him getting those end arounds. Whereas this year, they're really getting him the ball all over the route tree. So I could see a world where it happens, because it seems like there is, for whatever reason, a little bit better connection right now with Lance Ayuk, and that could just be coincidence. But I do see how somebody could read into that a little bit. But I don't know, man. Deebo Samuel looks like he's one of the top 10 best receivers in this league, and that's no disrespect to Brandon Ayuk. But so this is the way I look at it. I don't think either of them is necessarily going to be number 1 and number 2. And I don't want to sound cliche or hedge, but it feels like the 49ers will have a 1A, 1B situation where I think Deebo Samuel is still the 1A, but Brandon Ayuk could easily be that 1B, where you have certain weeks where one of the guys is going off and the other might not have as big of a game, but you're able to keep defenses honest. And, truthfully, with zero disrespect to either of those guys, as long as George Kittle's around, I still think Kittle's the primary option in the passing game. And I know that there's weeks where he doesn't show up on the stat sheet the same way, and people were like, oh, why aren't they giving the ball to Kittle? If you go back and you watch game film, which again, I know not everybody has the luxury of doing, but I can promise you in a lot of these games where Kittle isn't getting the ball, it's not because the 49ers are like, hey, we're just not going to give the ball to Greg. We don't want Greg catching the ball this week. It's
Greg doesn't deserve the ball today.
Greg doesn't deserve the ball this week. It's because defenses are literally bracketing this guy.
They say, no, Greg, you are not beating us.
They're like, we were going to make somebody else beat us this week. And then when you have two guys like Samuel and Ayuk, and you have a guy like Jaywan Jennings taking that huge step forward now too, like it's really, like I said, I'm very excited. Like right now, the focus is the Rams. I get it. Let's make let's see the 49ers make the playoffs. Let's see them, get to double-digit wins. That would be great. But if we're looking long-term, the amount of, young players they have at skill positions and Trey Lance on that rookie deal and the elite level, like the offensive line's been playing at a top 5 level, top 5, 6, 7, whatever you want to say level all year. Like this offense has the chance to be absolutely explosive once they dial it in. And again, it's easy for me to say that. If they don't go out and execute it, it doesn't matter. The potential doesn't matter if it doesn't come to fruition. But there's nothing that I'm looking at that would suggest that we're not looking at an offense that's going to be absolutely just dynamic from top to bottom. Because we've seen what it looks like when half these guys are healthy or half of them are firing on all cylinders, and when the quarterback play is, not terrible, but it's also not like at a crazy elite level. If you put together this whole package of this dynamic quarterback with a big arm, all these skill position guys being healthy and getting the chemistry of playing with one another, like, man, the sky is really the limit.
It really is. And there's so many ranges of outcomes. Obviously, the different skill positions that the 49ers have available, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Jaywan Jennings, even I what I love when Trey Lance plays is we see Trent Sherfield too. Trent Sherfield almost had a touchdown if Lance was a little bit better with his touch and or ball placement on that one that he had to Trent coming over the middle that ended up getting blocked by the underneath linebacker. But you got Kyle Juszczyk, you got weapons all over the place, and obviously with Kyle Shanahan running the show, there's so many things that are capable of happening. So I'm really, really excited to see the continued maturation of the process with, of course, maturation of the offense with Trey Lance. And I think next year that's hopefully what we're looking at. We'll find out. That's going to be a whole nother conversation for the offseason about quarterbacks and who's going, who's staying, all
I
that
mean,
good stuff.
I'll be honest with you, dude. Like, it gets me really like I have I'm a very hyperactive person. When I talk about things I'm passionate about, I get going pretty quick. I know Clinton and Don are joking about it, and I
Let
agree.
this man spit.
Yeah, there's times where I get talking really fast. And I'm telling you, dude, like I apologize, you guys. I appreciate you hanging with me while I do it. But when my mind starts racing, thinking about all these different concepts and these things they can do, like it's hard for me to take a deep breath and like calm down because it's just like I'm so excited thinking about this just explosive offense they could have. So I apologize.
Dude, I love when you're spitting. I love when Jordan gets going fast because I know what's going on up there. I want it all to come out. I love it, man.
There's times where my mind gets running quicker than my mouth can slow things down with. So I apologize, you guys. I'm working on it. I need to get better, but it's because of how excited I am. And Clint, I don't take it personally, dude. You're not wrong at all. But it's just like I promise you, I wouldn't be this passionate and excited about it if I didn't mean it. Like this, that's really like I can't wait to spend this whole off season like thinking about all the different things they're going to do. And I know people have made quips about it, but I don't doubt for a second when Kyle meant like, do I think that he drew up plays on the way back from Justin Fields' pro day? I don't know, man. I thought that might have been a stretch, but I could definitely see a world where it's the middle of like May or something. And Kyle Shanahan was off with his family somewhere, and he's pulling out a little notepad, thinking about all these different things he can do with the dynamic, quarterback and all these things. Like, it really is exciting. And I hate to put it this way too. Other than those few years we had with Colin Kaepernick when he was really playing at a high level, there hasn't been an elite, dynamic, dual threat quarterback like that for the 49ers since Steve Young, probably. You could argue some of these other guys that, there's a couple times I saw Sean Hill
put some respect on Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah, these guys have scrambled a little bit, but, if we're talking true dynamic talent, it's been a couple decades. So I think that it's extremely exciting in the long run. And I do think that it was really nice to see even just that one half of play from Trey Lance where you saw the possibilities, you saw the corner post get hit, you saw him extend plays. Because regardless of what happens this week, I know for me personally, I can at least go, hey, there's, a glimmer of hope for the future. There is a level of optimism. We saw him in actual NFL game action, not in the preseason, not videos of him in training camp or OTAs, him literally in NFL game action, making these big explosive plays. So at least that might get us through a rough offseason if things don't go according to plan this week. At least we have that sliver of hope going into next year and after that.
Yeah, that is such a phenomenal point. I mean, to think about, like, again, we already see the discourse. I mean, we've had a little bit in this chat. They have it in the YouTube chat. We see it on Twitter. Just nitpicking this kid, even after a pretty decent performance against the Texans. Imagine without even having that, the rampant speculation that would go on for an entire offseason if Trey Lance weren't to take the field again this year. So that's a positive in my opinion. We got to see him and we got to see a glimpse of the future and some of the things that he can provide. Switching gears to kind of the Rams. What is your take on Matthew Stafford? Do you think Staffy's going to be able to step up, or do you think what do you see from Matthew Stafford, and what do you kind of make of his play these last couple of weeks, and what do you think that's going to translate to against the 49ers?
So I'm glad we have Don Burren here right now because I think he can appreciate this more than most people. I think Matthew Stafford is incredibly talented. I think he's a guy who can make, if we're talking physical ability, I put him on the same tier as Mahomes and Rodgers and these guys where their arm talent is just insane. The angles they can throw at. the arm strength they have to push the ball downfield, the ability to throw into tight windows. Like, if we're talking purely just from an arm talent standpoint, he is elite. I do think there is a bit of a tendency to take a bit of risk on his end that has come back to bite him in recent weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the interception numbers go up. He leads the league in pick sixes, I believe. I do think a lot of that does have to do with the fact that the Rams have been far more reliant on basically going like, we're going to have one guy in the backfield and we're going empty, and Stafford's just going to let it rip. We're going to have four guys running route combinations and just let it rip. Whereas with Jared Goff, it was pretty much play action, cut off half the field, and give him layup throws over and over again. So like, I've seen this thing going around where it's like, people are like, oh, he hasn't been that much better than Jared Goff, or his efficiency numbers are the same as Jared Goff, and his analytics people are trying to make it seem like Stafford and Goff are comparable quarterbacks. And while I am just like Brad, I'm a Cal fan, I will defend Jared Goff every chance I get. He's not in the same stratosphere as Matthew Stafford when it comes to talent. And I think that the Rams being so reliant on him throwing as much as he has and not going to that, play action. Like the last time the Niners played the Rams late in the season like this was 2019. And I think they had like 31 play action passing attempts in that game. So it's 31 times in a game that they're having Jared Goff have that benefit of play action. And I forget the number, but the number for Matthew Stafford in a single game isn't anywhere near that. So basically, they're much more reliant on Matthew Stafford carrying this team with his arm. And I think the way that they call the offense has been far more aggressive too, which is why you're seeing a lot of the turnovers and stuff like that. But you're also seeing big explosive plays. He's thrown for last I remembered it was at 36. I don't know if it's higher now. Like, he's had a better season at quarterback than any 49ers quarterback has had in 20 years. Like, he's had a very good season. I just think that it's a situation where it gets clouded with some of these bad throws, or like that interception he had against Tennessee where he should have just taken the safety or sack and he throws it into the arms of a lineman who runs it in for for a pick six. So he's very good. And I think that he has the ability on any week to put up big numbers and make big throws in tough spots. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the 49ers DB room, which has a large number of players currently under COVID protocol, because I think Jimmy Ward really is the guy that has been the biggest issue for the Rams in recent years, because the Rams love putting Cooper Kupp. They did it with Robert Woods when he was healthy, but specifically Cooper Kupp now. They love putting their top wide receivers in the slot and kind of exploiting mismatches in the slot. They love that choice route out of the slot position. And Jimmy Ward is one of the few safeties in the league that you can leave on an island with a guy like Cooper Kupp and not only slow him down, but absolutely put the clamps on. Like Jimmy Ward, there's game tape going back years with him on Woods and Kupp and these guys who were really Brandon Cooks before that, where he really was just locking these guys up one-on-one in the slot. So if he's able to go, I think it'll make life much more difficult on Matthew Stafford. But I just implore 49ers fans not to sleep on Matthew Stafford just because he's thrown a couple bad pick sixes and just because the 49ers beat them the last time, because he is a very, very talented quarterback. Sean McVay is a really bright offensive mind, and all it takes is one game for us all to forget about how they've won 5 in a row and how the Rams haven't looked great against them and all these things that seem to be perpetuating amongst 49ers fans.
Absolutely. Got a lot of confidence 49er fans going into a very difficult must-win game. Are you concerned about the COVID kind of situation running through the DB room right now? Obviously, Diamador, Ambry, a couple others, Ward, like you mentioned. As long as no one gets added today, tomorrow, Saturday, we should be okay, because those guys should all clear by then, right? So are you worried at all, or do you think it's going to be okay?
First of all, if any of them are, experiencing symptoms or they're sick or whatever, as much as this game is important, the health of players and individual human beings is far more important than any football game or outcome. So I just want to state that before I say what I'm going to say, that is the utmost priority. And if they are feeling sick or aren't feeling well, I totally don't fault them in the slightest for missing this game and not being able to go. Obviously, this is a very serious thing that's been going on for years now. And it's just not something to be taken lightly. But having said that, the NFL's protocols on COVID have become extremely, questionable would be the word, because as far as I understand it, they don't have to test negative. They only need to be, they missed 5 days. So they all went
Right.
on Monday, Tuesday, I believe,
Yeah.
which means that they would hypothetically be able to be cleared by Sunday, and they don't have to return a negative test. They just have to be asymptomatic. And the majority of these cases among professional athletes, as far as I know, they are for the most part asymptomatic.
Hmm.
So it wouldn't it surprise me in the slightest if most, if not all, of these guys are able to play, just
Right.
simply based on the fact that all they have to do is basically show up to the stadium without a fever or without a glaring physical symptom. And knowing the competitiveness that these guys have, I don't see them sitting this game out. So again, they need to take care of themselves first and foremost. But if they are asymptomatic and they are feeling fine, there's nothing within the NFL protocols really right now that's preventing them from doing so, as long as they're not showing up with a fever in the triple digits. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not super worried about it, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Nick Bosa today at the podium talked about DeMeco Ryans. He said that when he was listening to DeMeco Ryans speak before the Texans game, he just was thinking to himself, like, "Yep, that's going to be a head coach somewhere else pretty darn soon." What do you think DeMeco Ryans is going to have to do to be able to stop down this potent offense attack led by Sean McVay, Stafford, Cam Akers is now going to be back. I saw a practice clip of him today running. It was a little jog, but hey, he's out there moving and looks like he's going to play. Obviously, Cooper Kupp and him putting up insane numbers this year. Van Jefferson's emergence. Uh, what do you think DeMeco's going to have to do here to help this team?
I think just keep doing what he's been doing. I think DeMeco Ryans has been phenomenal all year. I said it early. I had a lot of people in my mentions or responding to my articles and stuff being like, "Oh, he sucks. He's not good," and they're missing Saleh. And yeah, I'm sure they are missing Robert Saleh, particularly the person. He was a motivator. He was a guy that
Great
brought
motivator.
fire and electricity to that defense and that team. But if we're talking strictly X's and O's play calling, I don't think that there has been anything wrong at all with what DeMeco Ryans has done in the grand scheme of things. If we're valuing the whole body of work, obviously, has he had some mistakes here and there? Sure, every coach does every season. But if we're looking at the whole body of work, he has been fantastic. Like, I think you could make the argument in his first season, he's already a top 10 defensive coordinator in this league. He's been really creative. That was one thing Brad and I had the pleasure of covering training camp practices. And before every practice officially started, DeMeco and that first team defense were scheming up different pressure looks and different walkthroughs where they're not running at full speed or going up against an offense. They literally line up trash cans as if they're the offensive line.
Mhm.
But they get into these mental reps where they're putting guys in position and getting used to rushing from different spots, and the pressure looks they were creating. And Brad and I spent hours talking about it. Like, man, this is some exotic stuff. This isn't just rush four, run a little stunt here and there and drop seven. Like, no, they're getting extremely, extremely creative where you see these things like you have Nick Bosa standing up, rushing over a guard and not just being outside, tackle with his hand in the dirt. Having Arden Key rush from the interior where he's been a game-wrecking force. Having pressure brought from the corner spot. Like K'Wan Williams is, in my opinion, one of the best defensive backs in the league when he's coming in on blitzes at not only timing, but getting there as well. So I just think that DeMeco Ryans has done a really, really good job at identifying the strength of this team and then adding to it with a bit of twist and creativity. I think that the defensive staff they've put together, James Betcher has a really good track record of being a guy who's good at scheming up exotic blitzes and dialing up these really intricate pressures and stuff. So I think that he did a really good job filling out his staff with guys that are kind of on that same wavelength of, they know that they have the talent, but they also are going to get very creative and not just throw defenses the same or offenses the same look because, they have the talent to kind of get away with rushing 4 and dropping 7 over the course of the game. And yeah, they'll get beat a couple times, but their willingness to adapt and their willingness to take risks by sending pressure. Like there's been some huge plays this season where he sent a pressure where if a second, of the play lasts a second longer, that play might go for a touchdown. But because the pressure is getting home and what he's calling is ended up executing, like there was that they ended up losing the game. But in Tennessee, I think it was the last series before Tennessee scored, they dialed up a blitz on third down that got the Niners the ball back, that allowed them to go down the field and tie the game. Like stuff like that, it takes a lot of guts to make those play calls in that big moment. Because if you end up getting beat on a zero blitz or on a a heavy pressure, that play in particular, I don't think was a zero blitz. But if you call a heavy pressure and you get beat and the game's just over right there, you got some questions to answer after the game. So I do think that DeMeco Ryans deserves some credit because it's not a situation where it's like things go bad and we point fingers elsewhere and things go good, we give him credit. It's more so like, your reputation is riding on the performance of these play calls. And I think that he's done a really good job calling them when he needs to. So I'm thrilled with it. And I think that he will be a head coach by the end of next season because of how respected he was as a player in the league. People remember he was on the Eagles and Texans for quite some time. How highly he is spoken of around the league for his just cerebral and mental capacity. And it seems like he's just really good at, I don't want to say dealing with guys, but he's really good at working with players. And I think so many times these guys who played at a high level in the NFL are able to relate because while he may not be this like superstar player, he was a very good player for a very long time and he knows what it takes to be a good player. And I think that a lot of times you command the respect of a locker room full of NFL players when they know, hey, this guy's, he's not just telling me to do things he wouldn't do himself. There's a certain level of respect you have for anybody in any profession when they're going through what you're going through and they're asking you to do things that they would do themselves. So I'm really excited for him, man. It's been really fun watching this defense all year.
Absolutely. He's been phenomenal. The defensive line, even though Nick Bosa hasn't gotten a sack, I believe, since week 15, other guys like Arden Key, Jordan Willis, Samson Ebukam, Eric Armstead, Kentavious Street, the whole cast of characters come along, have been playing pretty well. DJ Jones. What do you continue to see? Because I know you have your eye on that D-line group. What do you continue to see from that defensive line, their impact, and what they're doing, with Bosa or without Bosa?
I think that we're finally seeing the depth that I thought would be there for most of the season. Obviously, 2019, when they had D Ford and Buckner and Armstead and Bosa on the field at the same time, well, I wouldn't argue they're the best defensive line ever. You could certainly put them in the discussion for best front four that I've ever seen at one time. That just havoc they were able to wreak, the skill sets meshing together. So it was going to be really hard to get back to that level. But what I thought that they lacked maybe in top end talent this year, I thought they made up for that with depth and having a second unit that was extremely deep with Arden Key and having guys like Kentavious Street and Kevin Givens being able to come in. So I think that, the tough thing is that Nick Bosa is kind of in a spot now where he's getting so much attention that it kind of, I don't want to say it takes away from his productivity or the perception of how good he is, but it kind of feels that way because if you go back and watch so many of these plays where Armstead's getting one-on-ones and Ebukam and Key and these guys are getting these one-on-one looks, it's due to the amount of attention being paid to Bosa. And it doesn't take anything away from them. These guys are being fantastic winning their matchups when they need to. But I just think that it's a situation where they have the pieces that are really complementing Bosa, and they've gotten to a point where it's like, hey, if you want to throw two bodies at Nick Bosa, if you want to chip him, if you want to do all these things, guess what? We have 4 or 5 other guys that are going to come in and consistently be fresh and come in. Last week, we saw Jordan Willis get a sack. We saw Ebukam's had a sack in 4 straight games. Arden Key has been wreaking havoc from the interior. He would have even more sacks if it wasn't for stupid roughing the passer penalty. I'm still not over that from that. That was just
Did you
calls I've ever seen
that
in my life.
TJ Watt sack on Baker Mayfield on national television where he just absolutely obliterated him, landed him on his head, and they didn't call a flag. And I'm just like, I get it, it's TJ Watt, but it's like, man, where's the consistency?
What do you expect these guys to do? Like change the laws of physics and gravity? Like
chest bump them and be like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
And I can appreciate, they like it's really it sucks because ever since Brady got hit where he got hit below the legs, I think it was 2008, and they made that rule where you can't hit guys low, you can't hit guys high. So you're leaving this small little box in the midsection, but at the same time, if you hit him there, you have to hit him, get him to the ground, but somehow pull yourself off before landing on it's completely unfair, the rules that they're making these defensive line guys and these defenders play with at this point. So I think the fact that the 49ers have been able to excel in spite of that is really inspiring. And I just think that, I wrote an article for Niners Nation a couple days ago about how good the 49ers front office has been at bringing in guys within the margins, and meaning that guys that they aren't breaking the bank for and getting production out of. So Arden Key is second on the team with 7 sacks, and he's tied for third with 32 pressures. And he's only, or I don't say only, because to most of us, it's a lot of money. He's making $1,045,000 this year, which when you compare his production to the market value, that is an extreme bargain for the 49ers that they're getting that level of production. And it's a one-year deal, and I can promise you he will not be signing for that cheap next season, whether it's here or wherever else he goes. But what that does to me is it puts the 49ers in a spot where having Chris Kosarek, having Darryl Tapp, having this defensive staff and the ability to have Bosa and Armstead and Kinlaw when he comes back next year, commanding attention. What it does is it sells free agents on, hey, if your stock's a little low, you're not getting the 3-4 year offers you want to get. We've seen guys in recent years, Jadeveon Clowney, Yannick Ngakoue, these guys that are really good pass rushers having to take below market deals to rebuild their value. What better place to do that than in San Francisco, where you're going to have chances to rush on guys one-on-one. And guess what? You're not going to have to go up against right and left tackles. You're going to be able to go against centers and guards and be moved all around. So I think having that success not only helps them right now, it also helps them in the future be able to sell future players, which again is going to be really important because the 49ers are up a bit against the cap coming up. They're going to have some tough decisions to make, but it really invites them being able to bring in guys on one-year deals. It's a different sport, but I know a lot of 49ers fans happen to be Warriors fans too in the Bay Area. Think about guys like right now, if you've been watching the Warriors this year, bringing in a guy like Otto Porter. Otto Porter's been a huge part of the Warriors because he was willing to come to a franchise that had that equity where, hey, if you come here for a year, your value is going to be built up and you may not stay there for a long time. You'll get the bag somewhere else, but you maximize that 1 year when you're there. And I don't like frequently making comparisons across sports, but I think that that's a good example of what the 49ers can do here. Become a destination specifically for defensive linemen where you come in on a 1 year deal that's team friendly, you build up your stock, you rack up sacks and pressures in that conducive environment for defensive linemen. And then, hey, the 49ers might not be able to pay you the next year, but guess what? Somebody else will. And then the 49ers, again, are building the reputation as a team that people want to play for and are willing to take a discount for, which is going to be extremely helpful when you're paying Nick Bosa $30 million a year and you're paying Deebo Samuel $20 million a year or whatever they're getting. They're going to need that. So I think that that's something that's been kind of flying under the radar. That'll be a huge deal for them going forward.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this offseason. There's going to be so many moves coming our way with only, I believe, 33 players under contract up until this point for 2022. So it is going to be quite the show this offseason, and Jordan and I will be here to cover it all. But let's talk a little bit about those defensive backs. Ambry Thomas, Josh Norman. We already talked about Jimmy Ward a little bit. We can talk about Tart too. But let's kind of stick with the cornerbacks for the most part. Norman finally got benched, and I find it poetically beautiful that the first time I've ever defended Josh Norman, he got benched. But what are you seeing out of Josh Norman? Is it going to be Dante Johnson? Emmanuel Mosley looks like he's right now one of the only healthy available cornerbacks that's not on the COVID list right now. What do you see from the cornerbacks? And how do you think they're going to perform? Obviously, Emmanuel Mosley hopefully going to be ready to rock against the Rams.
I think that, it's been no secret that the 49ers have had their issues with penalties. They've been burnt deep a couple times. There's been a revolving door at corners. They obviously lost Verrett. They lost Mosley, who were their two starting corners clearly in week one at separate times this season for long periods of time. So, yes, there's been a struggle there, but I do think that it's similar to offensive line play in the sense that they could have 10 really good snaps, but that one big pass interference on 3rd and long is going to make you forget all the good stuff. And I do think that they've been playing better in recent weeks. And it unfortunately just was a situation where that penalty issue reared its head again. And I thought that I had a lot of, I don't say respect, but I was happy that because he should be doing it. I was happy that Kyle Shanahan came out and said, no, I benched Josh Norman. Like it just can't happen anymore. I benched Josh Norman because I think the biggest problem is that Josh Norman's always been the player that you've seen this year. He's been a guy who's aggressive, grabby, and a lot of times, refs aren't going to call that every single time downfield. Like you can get away with that a lot, but I think we've seen at too many key junctures this season, him getting flagged for it. I just want to point out, it's not like he just came to the 49ers and started doing that. That's generally who he's been for the better part of his NFL career. I'm just surprised that it took Kyle Shanahan 17 weeks to get, or 15 weeks, however long he's been here, to get fed up with it.
Right.
You know, Ambry Thomas has taken some steps forward. You know, I said on here a couple of weeks ago that I wasn't rushed to be, filled with excitement because while he was in position, he wasn't making plays on the ball. I think that he's gotten much better with that. And again, my whole stance then too was that, hey, he's a rookie making his first couple starts. He can get better. You know, there's obviously room to do it. And I think he is taking those strides. He had that ball that almost was a pick six going the other way. But he was there in position and he got his hands on the ball. And that to me is the biggest thing, is that he's been better. The only play I can really recall where it would have been nice to see, a little bit better play made was actually a play that ended up getting called back. That was the deep ball. Davis Mills threw a dime that he dropped in between Jaquaski Tart and Ambry Thomas. But I don't think either was in bad position at all. It was just a really good play, and the ball happened to get there in, the split second that Thomas was attempting to swipe at the ball and make a play on it. But other than that, I thought he played a clean game, and I think he's been getting better, and I think he's a guy that definitely has the physical traits to be a starter in this league. But I think he's going to be like a shutdown, lockdown corner. I wouldn't be ready to say that just yet. But I definitely think that he's putting together the whole package. And that was my entire point I made a couple weeks ago, was that the positioning doesn't matter unless you're able to also make plays on the football regularly. And now that we're seeing him do that, I think that the positioning is much more valuable, if that makes sense. Like, my entire point before was just that it doesn't matter if you're there, if the ball's still being completed. Now we're seeing balls get thrown his way that aren't being completed, and that's ultimately the job of the defensive back. So I'm encouraged, would be my point with Ambry Thomas. I think that he is coming along very quickly. I think he's come a long way since you and I saw him in training camp.
Yes.
And it's fair. He's a rookie. Some of these guys aren't going to come out right away, and I have to remind myself that and be better myself about not rushing to judgment, particularly for guys who are in their first year adjusting to the speed of the NFL game. So if it's Mosley and Thomas this week, if he's able to clear protocols, I wouldn't have an issue with that. Lastly, I would add Dante Johnson gets a lot of crap from 49ers fans because he gets cut and re-signed and comes back to the team every year, and it's this big joke. And but for a fourth or fifth corner, which is what Dante Johnson is, he's not a bad player in the slightest. Most teams would be lucky to have a guy who is able to come in as a depth piece, understand the defense, step in a given game. And, he had the game-sealing pass breakup in this game against the Texans. He is capable of being a guy that's going to make some plays. Yeah, obviously he's not some all-world talent where you're going to be clamoring for him to start next year and sign Dante Johnson to this lucrative extension. But I think he gets so much unfair hate directed his way. So I think he'll be fine. And, honestly, DeMeco Ryans and this defense have stepped up for the better part of the season with that question mark at cornerback. So I don't see enough that would make me doubt it this week if Jimmy Ward's able to play. And as long as, we'll see if K'Wan Williams is able to go too. Obviously, that's a big deal in that nickel spot, because if he doesn't go, I'd have to imagine Demo Lenore would be in there. So if you have two rookies out there at the same time, it's obviously less than ideal. So we'll see. But I just think that as a whole, my entire point is that they haven't been as bad, I think, as people have made them out to be. But I understand that those penalties have come in really bad times, and there's been a couple times where I think it's cost them football games. So I understand it, but that doesn't mean that they're getting beat every single play. It just means that, they're good 8 plays and they're bad 2, but those 2 are really magnified because of the situation and because there's it's like, I don't want to speak for anybody in the comments or anybody watching, but I know for me personally, I would rather see a guy try to make a play on a ball and get beat deep than see him just start grabbing at a guy and get a pass interference penalty. While you could make the argument that the pass interference penalty is a spot foul and they're not getting any extra yards from it, to me, it just invites quarterbacks underthrowing balls and taking chances. Like, I was at that Colts game in the rain, and it felt like Carson Wentz was lost that whole game, but he knew if he just threw the ball downfield in one-on-one situations, that Niners DBs were going to grab it as receivers and they'd get penalties. And it's literally what it felt like happened all game. So I can see the frustration with those penalties building up over time, but I just want to say that I don't think that the DB room has been anywhere near as bad as people made them out to be. And Jaquaski Tart and Jimmy Ward are so damn good that it's hid a lot of the deficiencies you're going to experience having a revolving door at the cornerback positions.
Absolutely. Well said. One person who's coming back into the fold that we actually did not see a ton from this year is linebacker Dre Greenlaw. Obviously, Azeez Al-Shaair's still out. Doesn't seem like he will be back. Clearly, he won't be back this year. We'll see what it looks like in the potential postseason. But what do you anticipate seeing from Dre Greenlaw? Do you think Dre Greenlaw takes back the spot over Marcel Harris, or is Marcel Harris playing well enough to keep it? What do you think we see from Dre Greenlaw this week?
So when Drake Greenlaw came back the last time, I think it was before the Minnesota game, I yelled it from the rooftops, the mountaintops, whatever saying you want to use, that I think Azeez Al-Shaair has played so well that he shouldn't cede his starting spot, and I don't think that Greenlaw should just automatically come in and take that spot back. I
Mm,
wouldn't say the same about Marcel Harris. And I don't think that Harris has played bad by any stretch. In fact, I thought he's gotten a lot better. I didn't really think it was going to work out, this kind of hybrid linebacker safety role they had for him, where they basically converted him to a linebacker. Let's be honest. Like, yeah, he can do the things that he was asked to do as a safety, but he's essentially playing linebacker at this point.
right.
He's done admirable, and he's gotten a lot better throughout the season. I'm happy to take the L on that and say I was wrong, and he's done better. He's exceeded my expectations. But I do think that Greenlaw gives them some sideline to sideline speed that really does help against a team like the Rams that is predicated on a lot of the things the 49ers offense is, which is getting the ball in space and working horizontally. So I wouldn't fault them if they felt comfortable still, because, you know, those groin injuries are really tricky. Maybe Greenlaw still isn't back to 100%, but I just can't confidently sit here and say that I think Harris absolutely has to say the starter the same way I was with Azeez Al-Shaair. With Azeez Al-Shaair, I was 100% on board. He has to remain the guy. I can't say that same thing for Marcel Harris, with the added caveat that it's not that it's because he's been bad. It's just because I don't think that he was playing at such a high level. I can say it with the utmost confidence.
Absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. I would also agree. I would say Dre Greenlaw walks back into his old spot. Marcel Harris goes back to being a key special teamer. But we'll see. If I had to ask you a score prediction for the Rams, and I'll ask the chat at the same exact time. So in the chat, drop your score predictions for Rams versus 49ers this weekend. What do you think the score will end up looking like when it's all said and done?
Man, that's tough. You know, people aren't going to want to hear it. My gut tells me, and I could be wrong, my gut tells me that the 49ers end up losing this game in a close fashion, but the Falcons beat the Saints, so the 49ers still get into the playoffs. And I could be wrong. I wouldn't be the first time. I'll be the first to come on here and take the L and say I was wrong. I think that it'll be 30-24 Rams, something like that, 28-24, something, not super high scoring, but also not a defensive struggle either. I think that ultimately it's going to be really hard with the uncertainty at quarterback right now for the 49ers. But again, if I had to say right now, I would say that the 49ers don't win this game, but they still get into the playoffs. But hey, it's really hard. It's really hard. I said it before the last game. It's really hard to approach these matchups with like logic and I try to be objective with my analysis and look at numbers, film, all these things. All of logic goes out the window when the Rams play the 49ers. Everything that you think makes sense goes out the window. Like, remember that game in LA 2019? I believe the 49ers went down there with both their starting tackles out, and they end up winning that game. They had Joe Staley and Mike McGlinchey. If I'm not mistaken, they were both out for that game, and it was Brunskill and School, I believe, were starting that game. And they won that game against the defending NFC champions when the Rams were still kind of, the team to beat in the division. Like, this is a trend that's gone back years, and it's just so hard for me to sit here and be like, well, objectively, all the logic points to the Rams winning this game. But I don't want to completely disregard it either. So if I had to, I would say I think that they do. But for whatever it's worth, I think the Falcons are going to spoil the Saints season. I think that's a rivalry that runs very deep down there, and I think that they will relish the opportunity to eliminate the Saints from the playoff picture. And I just think Taysom Hill sucks. Like, I don't think he's very good. I don't like sounding disrespectful when I'm talking about players.
I don't think he's good either.
I do not enjoy watching Taysom Hill play football. At first, I used to joke about it because he had all these analytics numbers and stuff that made it seem like he was good. It was fun to joke about. After actually having to sit there and watch him, it's not enjoyable. I don't wish it upon anybody. America should not have to watch Taysom Hill in the playoffs. So I think that the Falcons are going to save the day and prevent that from even being a possibility. But hey, the 49ers could just prove me wrong. They could come out and win this game, and they could, I would have never expected them to win, 31-10, that first matchup. So anything's possible.
Right.
I've been wrong plenty of times. I'll continue to be wrong in the future, but I can't sit here and just be like, I think the Niners are going to win to make everybody feel good, because that just wouldn't be honest on my end. But I do think it will be a close game.
That that is a pretty bold take, but I don't think it's out the realm of possibility. This is going to be a hard game. And I think a lot of 49er fans are going to be really disappointed. Like, if they just, I see it, there's a lot of people thinking we're going to walk into LA and just take over and just going to be easy win. No, off to the playoffs, here we go. The Rams are going to want to whoop our ass, man. Like, so they're going to have to be ready to go. Obviously, it's going to be a home game for the Rams. 49er fans are known for taking over SoFi. I believe you went to SoFi earlier this year for the was it the Chargers preseason game?
It was, and let me tell you really quick, I haven't been to Jerry World in Dallas yet, but of the NFL stadiums I've been to and sports venues I've been to, it is absolutely incredible. And while it was the Chargers, so it's a little different, that stadium was like 80% 49ers fans. And I have some family in Southern California. I have some friends, I go and visit down there. And when I'm down there, I don't know if anybody watching is from down there that can correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like the Niners and the Raiders have a massively larger following than the Rams or the Chargers do. So I would not be surprised in the slightest if this is a game where it feels like even when the 49ers are on defense, they're getting that crowd noise and that loudness, and the Rams aren't going to have this inherent home field advantage where it's, silent when they're on offense and they can operate. Like, it's going to be a pretty balanced crowd, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, we've all seen the pictures of what it was like at the Coliseum when, 75% of the stadium was red. So 49ers fans show up down there. It really might feel like a home game for the 49ers. But yeah, that stadium, the ticket prices are absolutely insane.
Could imagine.
Anybody who can afford to get down there, if you can afford it, and that's the big if, because again, it's insane, I highly recommend it. It is an absolutely beautiful stadium, and it would be really cool to see the 49ers, on the road in a venue like that. So if you ever have the chance, please, I promise you it's worth it to an extent, because this week I saw tickets for $500 for standing room only, and I love the 49ers and I love watching football. No chance you're going to see me pay $500 to stand and watch a football game unless it's the Super Bowl. Absolutely no chance.
That's a lot of money for standing room only regular season. I know it's a playoff game, but sheesh.
That might have been for the pair, but I don't know. I saw $500 and something on Game Time, and my brain checked out. It could have been for a pair, but even then, no thanks.
Brittany says Sean McVay is a smart play caller. I know that Matt Stafford isn't playing his best. Odds that Rams just take their chances and chuck it deep. What do you say about that?
It felt like they tried to the first time, a couple times. Like, they took that shot on the first drive, and Jimmy Ward had that interception, which I think really set the tone early in that first matchup. But yeah, Brittany, that's a really good point, because I do think that it comes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, Matthew Stafford has incredible arm talent, and Odell Beckham's getting more comfortable in that offense. I think Van Jefferson's really good. Cooper Kupp's obviously having one of the best wide receiver seasons ever. Like, they have the personnel to take those shots downfield. But I do think that it will be an interesting battle to watch between the Niners D-line and that Rams offensive line, because if they're able to generate the pressure they've gotten in recent weeks, it's going to be really hard for the Rams to consistently take those shots. But I agree with everything everybody said. He's a brilliant offensive mind. Matt Stafford, while he isn't playing his best now, is very capable of having these big, like, I don't know if anybody remembers that Monday night game they had a couple weeks ago against Arizona, where he had a deep ball across the field. I believe it was off a play fake to Cooper Kupp. That was one of the best passes I've seen all season from any quarterback. And it kind of reminds you why the Rams were willing to part with what they did to bring in a guy like Matthew Stafford. So at any given time, yeah, he could take the top off the Niners defense. But if Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt are both playing, I feel much, much better as the 49ers defense and as a 49ers fan that they'll be able to hold up. As far as I know, Jaquiski's not on any injury designation this week, and I don't think he has come up on COVID protocols yet. Knock on wood. I don't want to be blamed for the things. I'm knocking on wood if you can hear it.
I'm knocking too. Don't worry.
So if Jimmy Ward's able to come back, I would feel much better about that. And real quick, I would add to that other question. I don't know if anybody saw, Jimmy Ward did a show with Grant Cohn this offseason, and he talked about how, I'm paraphrasing a bit, so I apologize if it's not the exact quote, but he talked about how he wasn't worried about Matt Stafford, and he's like, we beat these guys every time we play him. He's like, Matt Stafford couldn't win in Detroit with Megatron and these guys. Like, I'm not worried about that guy. And I was sitting there, and I'm like, hey, man, I respect the confidence, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, the Rams team.
We're all kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
like,
Jim.
Yeah, I was like, you're, very confident, man. Like, but after the way he played and after the way he's kind of like, it was almost like he baited the Rams into like, taking shots. I mean, do I think that the Rams sat there for 10 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever? I'm just like circling this date and specifically going through practice where like, this is where we own Jimmy Ward and show him not to talk about us on YouTube. So like, no, I don't think they did that. But I do think that McVay might have learned that Jimmy Ward is not somebody to take lightly. And I'd like to think he already knew that because Sean McVay is a very smart person and Jimmy Ward's been a very good player for a very long time. But after that pass game, like, it's really hard not to again, this is where it's like, as much as I think logic points to the Rams winning, like the 49ers just like once you start getting that psychological advantage over another person, like anybody who's played sports, even if you play like board games or something competitively, like let's say you play chess with a family member or something like that, if you beat them every single time, after a certain point, you're going to go into every single matchup feeling like it. NFL players are the same way too. They have the same kind of, human emotion.
Confidence.
Yeah, that same kind of confidence breed. And I think that at a certain point, like as much as I am like, damn, like it's a different team, different quarterback, these guys don't care. They went out and they beat them 31-10 last time. So it's really hard that, as much as I want to sit here and be like, guys, like this is a different Rams team. Don't be this confident. Who the hell am I to say that when they come out and they thump them? Like it's really hard, and that's another reason why I would not be surprised at all if the 49ers go in, handle business, they win this game. I hope they do because my preseason prediction for them was 10-7. And if they get to 10 wins, I think it's an objectively successful season, given all the circumstances and all the turbulence with quarterback position, ups and downs at corner and this and that. Like if they could win this game, it would be huge. And it would just be an incredible storyline. 6-0 against the Rams in 3 years. When the Rams are one of the better teams in football across that 3-year span would just be a phenomenal win. And it would just point to how crazy the NFL is because the 49ers can't beat a Seahawks team that's just absolutely terrible this year. Like it just comes back to this ownage that some teams have over one another.
Brittany Brown wants some of that ownage. She wants 24-10. That's her score prediction. She's sticking to it. She says the ownage continues. We'll find out if that actually is the case. I am excited to see what this game produces, what the outcome is going to be, because man, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I saw you tweet about it a little bit earlier. Hell, the 49ers get it, beat the Rams. We don't care about them getting swept by the Cardinals. We don't like consciously we don't, but subconsciously we really do care. But again, if the 49ers can win and sweep the Rams here, some of those poor losses earlier in the year, again, against the Cardinals, B team, against the Seattle Seahawks, both games, things like that, the Colts game, we don't care anymore, right? Because it's playoff football time. And playoff football, we understand it's a completely different season. It's a completely different vibe, mentality, different game speed, all that kind of stuff. So we can right a lot of wrongs. We can do a lot of good stuff if we can get this dub against the Rams, and hopefully that is the case. Is there anything else, Jordan, that you wanted to touch on before we head out?
Yeah, because I don't want to, I want to leave this on an optimistic note. So hopefully, I think that the Falcons will handle business against the Saints, and I feel very confident about that. Again, it's just kind of a gut feeling I have. I could be wrong, but on the off chance that they don't and the Niners lose, and this is the last, live going into a game this season. I just want to thank you.
Not.
I know you guys all absorb Brad's content and know him. I just hope you guys know how tremendous of a human being this man is. He is,
Jordan.
You're going to have to sit here and listen to this, bud. I'm sorry. He has guided me so much in doing this over the time I have known him, and has taken me under his wing and taught me so many things, and is just always there, willing to help out, and giving me this platform to talk with you guys and be here. It means the world to me. Everybody who tunes in and listens to me go on these long-winded rants and talking for 3 minutes without taking a breath. Like, I appreciate all of that so much. And it's been such a joy for me This is my first full season covering the 49ers for a big outlet with SB Nation. I've loved this team since I was a little kid, and this sport has meant more to me than anything other than my family and friends for my entire life. And it's just been so cool. So I just wanted to take a moment real quick and thank you guys for not only listening to me and what I have to say and allowing me to come on here, but for supporting Brad. Because as much as I know you guys like his content, and he deserves it for the work he does, he is just, you could not root for a better person. And I am honored to call him a friend, and he is just the best. So thank you guys for supporting the sourdough man himself, and because he deserves it all.
Jordan, thank you so much for that, man. I'm not very good at taking compliments, but I appreciate it, man. I really do. And again, to Jordan's point, first full year covering the San Francisco 49ers, first full year, really went into this year like I want to cover the 49ers. You got a gig with Niners Nations, one of the biggest blog and news syndicates that's out there right now. So got to give my guy a big old congrats, man. It's been a blast watching your growth this year. And just did you have a like last year, if we dropped it back maybe 2 years ago, did you even have 1,000 followers on Twitter yet? Like, and just to see how far you've come, man.
I had like 250 around this time last year, maybe like 300. Yeah, it was not like, and it's been phenomenal for me. And I could not have done it without people like Brad and without people like you guys in the comments watching the stuff, people willing to take a chance and read my articles and share my stuff and just hear what I have to say. And I don't lose sight of that at all. I'm an extremely grateful person, and I understand that I hope you guys know I put in a lot of work myself. I put in hours and hours and hours every week studying game film, poring over numbers, doing all this stuff. But it wouldn't be for anything if people like you guys didn't support us. So I just want to say thank you. I don't want to be all sappy and emotional, but I truly do mean that. And I am so grateful for all of you guys. So thank you so much.
I love it, Jordan. You're ending it on a beautiful note here. Tell the good people where they can support you, find your content, follow you, do all that good stuff.
You can find my Twitter. It's right there on the screen at Splash Cousin. I do most of my stuff through there. I had an Instagram for a while, to be honest. I'm not good at doing the Instagram stuff, so I've just managed to keep my stuff on Twitter. And then I write for Niners Nation. I do a few articles for them every week, so you can find me on there. There's a lot of really good, if you guys aren't already checking them out, there's a lot of really, really great content on there, film breakdowns, podcasts. I'm blessed to work with a lot of really, really talented people who are very passionate about delivering the best content they can surrounding the 49ers. So yeah, you guys can find me on there. And if you ever have, questions or want to talk football, I try my best to, interact as much as I can on Twitter and stuff. And if I miss something, or if you have a question in a comment I don't get to, please feel free to DM me whenever, and I will try to get to it whenever I can. Because again, like I said, none of this would be possible without you guys. I would just be speaking into the void. So any way I can reciprocate my gratitude, I'm always happy to do so.
Absolutely love it, man. We will save the tears for the playoff victories because we're going to keep manifesting 49ers moving on into the playoffs. We need it. We got it. Have it. We need more of it. I want to see the 49ers go into the playoffs just like you do, just so we can continue to come back, keep talking about 49ers football. Even if the season were to end this weekend, we are going to be back next week talking about 49ers football, recaps, offseason. So hopefully that's not the case. Obviously, we want to be talking about dubs and dubs only, but we know that we can't make those decisions for ourselves. So until then, you guys be well, and we got a obviously huge game this weekend with all the marbles on the line. Win and get in. Hell, lose, Falcons win, get in. We'll take whatever it takes at this point. So until then, you guys be good, and then we'll see you on the other side.